Show, labor right now Marlon Morgan, general for communication. No match to this man. Right now him rub out. Even PJ Patterson. Machination, the great PJ Patterson was your command the English language. Now you have a new commander. People, labor rights. Rumble, show a man rumble. Watch on man. Me want you to share this. Send it to any JLP group, open-minded group, and even PMP group for them see the facts, the truth that Mr. Marlon Morgan is gonna tell you guys. Me don't want to talk too long, people. Hear this.
March 7th, 2025, and we come to you live from the studios of News Talk 93 FM right here on the Mona campus of the University of the West Indies. Now, this morning, we are on the heels of a former prime minister of ours having elected to swap out his former status as an elder statesman in this country for his political garb. Former Prime Minister PJ Patterson is now fair game. He is in the ring. He is on the field of play. When you're on the field of play, you're not going to be treated with kid gloves, particularly when you have the kind of sordid history as does Patterson. You're not going to be treated with kid gloves or tackled in any light manner, when in fact you are as polarizing as is PJ Patterson. Our former Prime Minister, listeners, attended upon the Summit Hotel in New Kingston last evening for what was dubbed a symposium, a forum if you may, where he, among other things, was intended on, quote-unquote, setting the record straight. Well, from where I sit, I think the record where our former Prime Minister PJ Patterson is concerned is quite straight. Well, first of all, when a former Prime Minister has to re-enter the political fray in the way PJ Patterson has, in a bid to, quote-unquote, set the record straight, it must raise eyebrows. Because he must have felt so embattled that he would need in any way to be coming out and defending his legacy or the lack thereof. When a former prime minister has to retreat from the pavilion in which he was hitherto ensconced to the rough and tumble of the political discourse and campaign for his party in the way PJ Patterson is, you know trouble there. First of all, listeners, no sober or objective assessment of PJ Patterson and his incumbency as our longest serving prime minister in this country can be done or had without locating him properly in the history and political annals of this country. Indeed, no sober or objective assessment can suggest that PJ Patterson was all bad or all good for that matter. I want to start with some incontrovertible things. Jamaica has had historically, or certainly in a dispensation past, a sordid state of affairs with respect to the conduct of elections and indeed elevated temperatures in relation to the cut and thrust of the politics. In other words, characterized largely by electoral irregularities or alleged electoral irregularities, and of course, political intimidation, political violence. It is to PJ Patterson's credit, listeners, that we have made the strides that we have made vis-a-vis a lowering of the political temperature through, not least, the Electoral Advisory Commission, which has since become the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. Our electoral system at present is the envy of many around the world, certainly across Latin America and the Caribbean. PJ Patterson, in my mind as well, has to be credited with the establishment of some institutions that were not only warranted and much needed, but have gone on to serve the Jamaican people well. I speak primarily here of the National Health Fund, the Drug for the Elderly Program, JLP, the JUTC, because we know that the JOS buses had been a feature of a dispensation pass, and for some time we didn't have a fit-for-purpose public transportation system in our metropolitan region. The JUTC is that outfit, and it is to Patterson's credit. Although I have my own views as to the spate of poverty that saw and necessitated the establishment of the PATH program, to the extent that a country will always have vulnerable segments of its population, while it is a case where the poor management of the country by the PJ Patterson administration necessitated a response such as PATH, I think it is still worthy of attributing credit. So the Program for Advancement through Health and Education, PATH, which seeks, among other things, to provide critical support to the poor in this country, I think that is commendable. Your incumbent government, that being the Andrew Holness-led Jamaica Labour Party government, has sought to make PATH even bigger and better, certainly improving the payout or the financial support to beneficiaries, even as the fundamental strategy is to not necessarily increase the number of people on PATH, but importantly, manage the country in such a way that more people are able to move listeners from welfare to work. That's what we want in this country. So when I say make PATH bigger and better, I don't mean bigger necessarily in terms of enrollment, bigger in terms of the support, its institutional capacity, its institutional reach, and of course, as Colonel Charles Jr., as the Labour and Social Security Minister at present is doing, ensuring that we have a more fit-for-purpose and relevant mechanism to determine whether persons should be placed on the program. So there's an overhaul of how people are placed on PATH that is happening as I speak. In short, listeners, we have a little saying in Jamaica where we say, leave well alone. It is a Jamaican adage that I would commend to PJ Patterson on a morning such as this. As a former Prime Minister of this country, one who I've already described as being very polarizing, certainly in terms of the sentiments he evokes, yes, I think it would have been better for him to leave well alone. For strategists of the Jamaica Labour Party, which is essentially the main opponents of PJ Patterson's PNP, it is very clear that at present, the Mark Golding-led PNP, as is PJ Patterson, there are gifts that keep on giving. And the foremost point I want to make this morning in relation to PJ Patterson and his symposium last evening, dubbed Setting the Record Straight, is that by any objective measure, listeners, by any sober and objective measure, where PJ Patterson is concerned, when the pluses and the minuses cancel each other out, we are left with far more negatives vis-a-vis PJ Patterson and his tenure as Prime Minister of this country, our longest serving Prime Minister, at least up to now, than positives. The negatives far outstrip the positives. First and foremost, listeners, the media landscape and the psyche of the Jamaican people when Patterson ruled the roost was fundamentally different from what it is today. The Jamaican people as they are today, them no kin teeth. They don't mince words. And social media makes that pellucid. It's very manifest. PJ ruled the roost in an era where we were analog, not digital. He ruled the roost in an era where we didn't have the proliferation in radio stations that we now have. We certainly didn't have the advent, as it were, of new media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, YouTube. We had a couple TV stations. At one point when he would have started as Prime Minister, we only had one TV station. And then CVM came along sometime thereafter. And so, when you look at everything concerning Jamaica at present, we speak in the present, yes, of a new Jamaica that is emerging, a better Jamaica. And when we speak of that, we do so in glowing terms, and we do so by virtue of objective and empirical data, because we are proud as a people and we are pleased because we know that this has not always been the case. The macroeconomic stability that Jamaica boasts, listeners, has not always been the case. The PJ Patterson administration, their management of the economy, left much to be desired. In fact, my own assessment of it is that PJ governed as Prime Minister from one election to the next. He didn't have as comprehensive and forward-thinking approach to governance as he ought to have had. And that is why a number of the quote-unquote non-election winning things, though very important, were neglected and not catered to by the PJ Patterson administration. I speak of such things as the backlog in our courts. I speak of such things as the state of our court infrastructure. PJ's assessment was that, listen, road can win elections, so let me run with roads. He didn't care about courthouses, really. He didn't care about the backlog in our system, our criminal justice system and our court system in particular. And sadly, he didn't appreciate the nexus between the slow pace at which the wheels of justice in this country turned when he ruled the roost, with the spate of violence and murders in the country. So he doesn't even understand and appreciate, in my view, the role his negligence played in creating and exacerbating an ecosystem of violence and lawlessness in this country. PJ Patterson's incumbency left much to be desired on the crime management front, where Jamaica moved from 400 murders per year in 1989 to 1,600 murders per year in 2005 under his watch as Prime Minister, when Jamaica attained the dubious and unenviable distinction of being the murder capital of the world. That is the PJ Patterson of whom we speak this morning, listeners. Corruption was the order of the day. Lack of accountability with that corruption was also the order of the day. A breakdown in the social fabric of Jamaica. Considerable breakdown, because as people lost jobs, women became more vulnerable. Women were at the behest of their partners, some of whom were abusive toward them. The free zone closed down and so on. We did not have the money to do the things that we needed to do in as timely a manner as we needed to do them, such as infrastructure work, water systems across communities, paying public sector workers better, fixing roads and so on. So all the things that we speak of today, we are celebrating them because they were not always the case. The macroeconomic stability that we speak of today, the resilience that we boast as an economy today, so much so that a ratings agency could have given us a certain rating in the first quarter of 2024 prior to the passage of Beryl and Tropical Storm Raphael last year. And we have had that rating reaffirmed in the first quarter of 2025. That speaks to the resilience that the Jamaican economy now enjoys. Our net international reserves, I saw a tweet from Wayne Chen a couple of days ago, where he makes the point that where Jamaica's net international reserves stand at present, yes, it is ahead of the Twin Island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. PJ Patterson's Jamaica could never have boasted those levels of reserves, which would have outstripped that of Trinidad and Tobago. Let's be clear on that. PJ Patterson's Jamaica, listeners, was a Jamaica where there were hospital user fees, cost sharing, tax packages after tax package after tax package. Each budget cycle under PJ Patterson would have been characterized by anxiety and trepidation, fear, literally, on the part of businesses and consumers alike. That was the PJ Patterson Jamaica. Corruption scandals, budget overruns, no accountability, youthful exuberance was the order of the day, as opposed to holding errant ministers like Philip Powell to account. PJ Patterson's Jamaica was a run with it Jamaica, a living above our means Jamaica. It was a toll road Jamaica because Jamaica didn't have the resources to do what the government is doing at present. The South Coast Highway Improvement Project that connects Harbourview to St. Thomas in the east is not a toll road. PJ's administration was never able to do something like that. The Montego Bay Perimeter Road, that Montego Bay bypass that is now being built to the tune of billions of dollars, millions of United States dollars, and billions of Jamaican dollars. The PJ Patterson government was never able to do something like that. All they could do was get overseas people to come and build roads and then have his people, his Jamaican brothers and sisters, pay to drive on those roads because they didn't have the resources as a government so to do. The PJ Patterson Jamaica, listeners, was a Jamaica of expensive borrowing, double-digit interest rates, borrowing on the international capital markets, and celebrating loans. On many occasions, Omar Davies would return from road trips to Europe, for example, boasting about the loans that he managed to raise while he was in London. Yes, it's a Jamaica of legacy debt. loss-making public bodies such as Air Jamaica, the Sugar Company of Jamaica, Clarendon Alumina Partners, the forward sale of bauxite losses, Soapberry, Cricket World Cup related losses, and debt. It was a Jamaica of considerable loss-making public entities and legacy debt. Not to mention, of course, low morale amongst public sector workers on account of them being poorly paid. Our public sector workers at present are considerably better paid relative to the PJ Patterson government of old. I could speak on this matter for eternity. But alas, we're up on the break. We're going to run to the break and come to the phone lines and take your calls. Stay with us.